Welcome everybody to our SWEEP webinar on composting labeling. While we are waiting for folks to log in, we are going to do some panelist intros, and I'm going to launch a poll that we would be grateful to get your feedback on. And so I'm going to start with the launching the poll. You can fill it in on at your leisure. And let's see here. There we go. Okay, so actually not on your leisure because we're going to be starting the presentation soon. So we're very fortunate to have with us Linda Norris-Walt with the U.S. Composting Council. Linda is the Deputy Director and Advocacy and Chapters Director of USCC. She's been in the industry for 30 years. A big chunk of that was as the Director of Recycling for Frederick County, and she's a proud Maryland resident, and folks should definitely pay attention to what's going on in Maryland on the waste front. There's a lot of very exciting stuff going on there. So I'm sure we're going to see lots of exciting stuff from Linda and her team there, in addition to what's going on nationally. We are also very fortunate to have Jennifer Kernett from the Biodegradable Products Institute, BPI. Jenny's been with BPI for a few years, and now she is the certification team manager, supporting other project managers who work with companies throughout the BPI certification process. We also have Natasha Dyer, who is the executive director of SWEEP. And Natasha came to SWEEP from the city of Atlanta, where she was the organics coordinator for approximately a decade. And Natasha has a great deal of experience in the waste industry. Prior to Atlanta, she worked both for a hauler and a waste management consultant. And even before that, she was in the fashion industry and was just so appalled at all the waste and environmental footprint of what she loved to do. But she says, I got to do something about this. So she, fortunately for us, got into waste and now is capably at the helm of SWEEP. I'm Rob Watson. I'm the founder and president of SWEEP, but mostly my job is to steer the ship and let the experts talk on this very important topic. So why don't we get Linda and Jenny going, and I'll keep the poll open for another minute or two, but I think we can walk and chew gum at the same time and begin the presentation while folks are also working through the polling questions.
Okay, you want me to go ahead and start sharing then?
Yeah, you're up.
Okay. Okay, can you all see the slides?
Yes.
Excellent. Okay, into slideshow. Okay, so good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to SWEEP for having us here to talk about this important topic that we really, both our organizations and many others, want to get out to the world because we want to see change in this area. My name is Linda Norris-Walt, and you heard what I do. And we are trying to make this presentation in as many places as we can to spur states and hopefully sooner or later nationally see some action on compostable labeling that from our side will help composters to have more success if they choose to accept compostable packaging in their compost stream. So I am going to start out with some fun. So Have you tried to plan a graduation party or a work picnic that is zero waste or even trying to be sustainably conscious? If you're having a pretty big crowd, you're probably not going to have enough of your own dishware to make it reusable. So you can work on, integrating any number of recyclable materials into your menus. In the picture, I can see a hopefully glass or maybe plastic pickle jar that can be recycled along with the mustard and ketchup bottles. You can put your drinks in aluminum cans. But when it comes to the servingware, the plates, all those sorts of things, there's definitely more of a challenge. And for many people, they tend to first think compostable. So you head to the local grocery store or party store to purchase your serviceware. But how many of you are like my husband in this picture, spending 10 minutes in the aisle, if you're conscientious, reading the labels, seeing eco-friendly, compostable, plant-based, you name it, all kinds of names are out there to try to lure you to buy those materials. Or maybe you don't do that and you just grab whatever sounds remotely eco-friendly. That's more like my husband. So in most places in the US, looking for true certified compostable materials can be an exercise in futility. Every product manager out there who has any kind of business knows that in today's world, it's smart to have some kind of environmentally friendly label on your materials because of all the studies we've seen about how important Americans think it is to be protecting the environment in the things that they consume. But it just seems too many companies aren't aware, or maybe worse, don't care about the truth of their claims, which is why many of us in this field responded in great detail to the FTC's call for green guides revisions to hope to fix this problem. None of us wants to be labeled as a greenwasher. And once a consumer has put that label on a product, or strangely enough, on a composter who might be accepting materials that are not, they don't want to accept, that are coming through the stream by mistake, you never know when that label might get stuck to you. And this is why the compost industry has become more vehement in our pickiness about compostable products. It's why the compost industry is working our tails off to understand what our manufacturers want to accept if they do decide they want to be part of accepting compostable packaging. So I wanted to tell you a little bit about our organization in case you don't know us. U.S. Composting Council has been around for the past 30 years, working towards the success of composters, towards the use of compost, towards training of composters, and increasingly towards plugging compost into the need for climate solutions. So that is one of the big functions of USCC, is to represent the industry, set standards for both people and product, and to advocate for good compost practices and policies that benefit the industry. So a little bit of context. Compost manufacturers make up the majority, the largest category of our organization. They are our mission and our reason why we are here. This chart shows our members by member type, and the big green bar is compost manufacturers, who are private sector, and public agency manufacturers are in the beige bar. And that also includes some programs that may not have a facility, but they are accepting materials that are sent to a compost facility. And as you can see, many of you on this webinar, I think that companies and municipalities are big parts of our organization, as well as community composters, academics, consultants, equipment manufacturers, and compostable products, people along the supply chain for compostable products. So we do try to work together among all of our allies in the industry to come up with the best solution for composters that can also feed the needs of others in our organization. So I wanted to give a little bit of background that has some context for how this issue has become so important to us. The composting industry, as we know it today, really began commercially with yard waste bans in the early 90s. And those bans now exist in 17 states and 4 more in a limited form. So those yard waste bans generated the first wave of compost businesses who often came from landscaping businesses like the one you see in the picture here, which is St. Louis Composting, or from farm manure composting systems such as A1 Organics. Many of those early businesses are now the large commercial players in the industry. And there are many, we're finding through a study that we've done that the next largest category is medium scale compost manufacturers. So we began to notice a few sites expanding in around 2005 with the incorporation of food waste as a desirable feedstock, especially from pure food sources. Back of house is what we call it now, such as distribution centers and large grocery chains. So there's an example of, why this is all about nitrogen. It's all about moisture. It's all about material that composters need to provide a good mix and a reliable feedstock in their compost pile. So to give a little bit more context, I thought I would pull this slide from BioCycle's study last summer that was released. And it shows that access is increasing to food waste composting, especially in states like California and Washington, where there are mandates, in locations like Texas, where demand for compost is high, and in places like North Carolina and Minnesota, where there are vigorous grant programs from tipping fees and other sources that support the development of new facilities. And here you can also see that the number of programs and communities that are accepting food waste are growing. So this shows that a 47% increase in the number of residential food waste collection programs has taken place for the last few years. Since 21, which is when the last study was done, a 39% increase in the number of communities with access, and 49% increase in households who can put out food waste at their curb or take it to a drop-off. We did notice, though, that it's interesting that there are not a lot more states adding on. So the programs are getting deeper rather than wider, which is just an interesting observation. So with this growth of food waste comes compostable packaging. And not every facility is taking compostable packaging. Our survey showed, I didn't look it up right before this, so I've forgotten the number, but we had a smaller number of facilities, if you've read the BioCycle study, than the BioCycle study is showing. So it is a relatively small percentage of the food waste composting facilities that are accepting packaging. But what is coming in both at the facilities that are asking for packaging and the facilities that are not is a flood of lookalikes, mistakes, and what I will call, in comparison to wishful recycling, I'll call it wish posting. I haven't heard that anywhere yet. I don't know if it will stick, but I'll say that. And what this has indicated is that there is a desperate need for clear labeling, education, and enforcement in places where you can enforce the law that says you cannot use things that are not compostable. So this guy is Clinton Sander from A1 Organics in Colorado. And if you're in the compost industry, you've heard this situation and you've heard about all of the other compost facilities that have run into the same problems. If you look behind him, they tried to get their customers to listen to them, to go to the generator, make sure the generator wasn't sending material that wasn't supposed to be coming to them, but it kept coming and coming. So, even though there's a lot of work being done on field testing and certified lab testing of compostable products, we're still actually drowning under the flood of things that aren't even in that category. So what we have found is that until we can get a handle on these, what we call lookalike products, we can't even deal with whether products are breaking down or not. From composters' point of view, until we get these things out of our streams, it makes the business model really difficult and I'll tell you a few reasons why. One of the main reasons is that soil health and a quality product are the drivers for a successful compost business. Composters do get money on the way in with tipping fees, but truly successful, sustainable composters with longevity need to have a quality product. If you're a business person who is making something, if you're getting junk in, it is hard to put anything out that is not junk out. So a lot of composters like A1 Organics have had to take a really good look at what they're taking, and some of them have made the decision at this point in time, until we get a handle on these problems, to not take compostable packaging. And that's what we're talking about today. So there's just another example of what we're struggling with, a bag coming into a composting facility. And with the proliferation of these problems, what USCC did with BPI in 2022 was formed a task force of the two industries, and we included many groups, many stakeholders to take a look at what areas of law and what areas of labeling we have in common, so that if we were to put regulations out there and legislative suggestions, we could all stand behind them as these are a compromise or best practices that both industries can live with. So what we have done, oh, there's another picture. You're getting a lot of shots. Sorry about that. I didn't realize I had them. But what we have done is put together labeling principles that focus on what we can accept as composters from our side of this. Now, Jenny is also going to explain some of the labeling pieces of it in terms of things that composters felt they could live with in terms of how compostables are labeled. Although from composters' point of view, this stuff needs to be handled at the generator consumer end. By the time it gets down the pipe to the composter, it's really very, very hard to separate out contamination from the material that we need in composting. Another really important point that's in the principles is the fact that we need rotting food. Put plainly, rotting food is what composters want. The ones who are accepting packaging because it's bringing rotting food in with the packaging. So it's not as if composters went out there and said, we need compostable packaging in our piles. Really what we're looking for is compostable packaging that brings in food. So what's been integrated into the principles strongly from composter side is that any packaging that goes through labeling should have a use for compostable food, or should have a use for food, so that we will get some food out of it. We're really not interested in flip-flops. We're really not interested in cell phone cases. You know what I'm talking about. All these other products that people really want to put out there because the consumer is asking for them, those are not what we are interested in. We want the things related to food. So that's why we said that claims of compostability in these guidelines, which the link is up there, compostingcouncil.org/truth in labeling, should carry a food product, scraps, or other organic materials, such as yard trimmings. The other really important labeling principle to composters that I hear over and over again is one that we pushed to have in there and that BPI agreed was important, which is that claims of compostability should be limited to products that are certified compostable by a third-party entity. And what we were generally working with there was BPI, where Jenny is from, and also field testing. Composters believe field testing and lab testing are both important. And right now, it's limited to organizations like BPI, or CREF has a field testing program as well. So we're interested in seeing products field tested and lab tested to verify that they will break down. This is really important in terms of legislative policy, because what this translates to is we want more states like Colorado and California who have integrated into their laws for compostable product, or for compostable products, EPR, whatever, are integrating into their laws that if you produce a product that carries the title biodegradable, eco-friendly, or even says it's compostable and it's not lab tested, that product can be prosecuted by the Attorney General or whatever the appropriate authority is in that state. That is really important to us because that's the only thing that's going to stop the flood of these products that are coming through the pipeline. So from composters, food associated material, and prosecuting people who are putting things out there that shouldn't be are two of our biggest priorities. Now, in a minute, Jenny's going to talk to you more about the labeling items that we also feel are big priorities because we need to make it easy for consumers to put this material in the right bin. So I think right now, I think that's my last one. I'm turning it over to Natasha to, I guess, put Jenny on next. So if there are any questions at the right point, I'm happy to take them.
We did have one question from the audience so far. So when you state materials are compostable, what composting method are you utilizing to define the processing capability?
So as I mentioned, the CMA process and the BPI process, which is based on ASTM.
Okay, thank you. If anybody has any questions, please feel free to post them either in the webinar chat or using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. Thank you very much, Linda, and welcome, Jenny.
All right, thanks. I'm going to start sharing my screen. So I'm just working with one screen this week. So sorry about the bar at the top and the bottom. I'm just going to have to work with that. But thanks, Linda. I'm going to continue on from where you left off. And also, I apologize to everyone in advance. There's going to be a little bit of overlapping, but both of our organizations are working toward many of the same goals. So I take that overlap as a good thing. So I just want to share some quick information about BPI before moving into the back half of this presentation for those of you who don't really know much or anything about who we are and what we do. Founded in 1999, BPI has been around for 25 years and is the leading authority on compostable products and packaging. We operate under three main pillars: certification, education, and advocacy. Our work in the certification sphere is probably the most well-known and recognizable. That's where I do my work, helping companies to navigate the process of certifying their products, which culminates in being able to use the BPI certification mark on those products. But we also do a lot of work to drive awareness and understanding of composting systems that include certified products, as well as advocate for access to these systems and supporting legislation that supports the circular economy. Before getting into policy, I'd like to go over the labeling requirements that are part of BPI's certification program, as well as why product labeling matters. All BPI certified products must be labeled with the elements shown on this slide, which includes the BPI certification mark in the form of our swirl element, the letters BPI, and the word compostable. A company identifier must also be displayed so that the product can be traced back to the manufacturer, and disclaimer language must also be used, indicating that the products are commercially compostable only and that facilities may not exist locally for a consumer. Review of product and packaging artwork to confirm compliant artwork designs is actually built into our certification program. These requirements can only do so much, though. We can't force companies that are not part of our certification program and membership to label their products clearly, nor can we go after products that aren't compostable at all that might appear to be. Last year, BPI and Closed Loop Partners published a joint study evaluating product labeling and design and how consumers respond to them. This was a digital study with over 2,700 respondents that represented the general U.S. population. A wide variety of products and designs were tested in all sorts of combinations. Any combination that could be thought of was used here. I encourage those of you who are interested in the details of the study, including more information about the stakeholders, sponsors, methods, respondents, and the responses, to read the entire study, as I'm only including a super small snapshot of it here, just kind of for context and background. I've included just a couple of examples of the results that were seen in that study. This first slide here shows that the lid design identified as the most clearly labeled as compostable includes a larger compostable callout, a green tint, and the BPI certification mark. It's hard to see, but throughout the options across the bottom of the chart, it shows examples that use like a smaller compostable, smaller word of compostable, no use of compostable at all, clear coloring instead of green tinting, and just other changes like that. This next slide, the data shows how consumers can be misled by greenwashing terms. In this example, biodegradable and made from plants proved to be the most misleading and were consistently identified as compostable. With these examples in mind, some of the main highlights from the study are, number one, lookalike packaging is a major problem. Up to half of respondents mistook made from plants to mean compostable. Number two, terminology really matters. Products that make unsubstantiated claims like biodegradable, degradable, or decomposable are commonly mistaken for being compostable. Up to 49% of consumers cannot distinguish between claims of biodegradable and compostable. I don't know if we saw the poll results or if that's at the very end, but I don't think this webinar is going to be representative of the general population, but just curious to see kind of what that first answer was going to be about what to call packaging. Number three here, consumer education about the composting stream is desperately needed. Consumers are consistently confused about how to dispose of compostable packaging. Nearly a third of respondents here said that they placed compostables in the recycling bin. And then number four, visual cues matter. Including multiple different labeling elements increases compliance. The use of coloring like green or brown tinting or striping, the word compostable, and the BPI certification mark all increased positive identification. The BPI certification mark was the most effective individual single cue, but the most important takeaway here is that this effect was really cumulative. The most effective labeling schemes incorporated all of the cues. In other words, we need color, we need terminology, and we need certification marks and disclaimers. And why does all of this matter? Because confusion at the consumer level obviously leads to contamination at the composter level, which we all identify as a major concern and problem. I was at a roundtable session at USCC's Compost 2024 conference a few years ago, and there were 10 tables discussing the same prompt independently, which was, as composters, why do you accept or not accept certified compostables? For the composters that do not accept compostables, I think every single table identified contamination from conventional lookalikes as a top reason, which isn't surprising, but still, I think important to note. As a side note, BPI does offer a free service that enables composters to test their overs to confirm if they are compostables that aren't breaking down and performing as they should, or if they're actually conventional products. We haven't had a ton of takers on using the service, but the samples that have been tested so far were like green film, really just conventional PE bags rather than failed compostable. Linda mentioned this, but another unfortunate consequence of consumer confusion is that compostable products, as well as the really the food and organic waste they carry, end up in landfills, and we don't want that. If consumers can't identify if a product is compostable or not, that product is not going to make it into the correct stream. And now moving on to policy, the initial labeling requirements from prior to 2022 were pretty limited. The BPI certification scheme and select states shared common requirements, third-party certification and an associated mark, certification mark on display, inclusion of the word compostable, and prohibition of the term biodegradable. But there were definitely some important things missing, such as consistent design requirements for all compostable products and prohibitions on non-compostables using similar designs. BPI has invested in policy work because our ability to influence the industry through certification stops at our membership. As I mentioned before, a company that chooses not to certify a product with BPI doesn't have to follow BPI's labeling requirements. So these policies reach further than our certification program can. They reward good actors that already certify and make products associated with food and are clearly labeled, displaying a third-party certification mark, using color effectively, and so on. And then maybe most importantly, they also punish bad actors by prohibiting misleading and unsubstantiated terminology, and in some cases, prohibiting misleading visual cues that would generally indicate compostability. Additionally, it's important to create uniformity, which provides consumers with easily identifiable products that can be distinguished from recyclables. So recently, BPI and USCC released a joint set of model principles for labeling compostable products, what Linda mentioned earlier, and they provide standardized definitions and parameters to help shape the laws that help consumers make the right choice every time. Stakeholders involved in creating these principles included staff from both BPI and USCC, as well as other experts representing the entire compost supply chain, from composters and municipalities to resin manufacturers and the brands themselves. The principles really cover what we've talked about here today already, reinforcing rules to reward the good guys who are labeling with very clear cues for consumers, identifying ideal design elements for different compostable product types, so certain requirements for bags versus cutlery versus plates, and describing prohibitions for non-compostables. Again, echoing what Linda said, association with desirable organic waste is also included here. So think food packaging or yard waste bags rather than poly bags used for shipping clothing. They also direct states to pursue rules consistent with each other and request exemptions from plastic resin identification code requirements. So you can read more about the principles, each individual one, on both BPI's and USCC's websites if you want more details, want to see more of the language there. There's some recent examples of the principles in action out of Washington and Colorado that I think they're both going into effect this year. So both states require third-party certification and prohibit misleading terminology, as well as mandate certain coloring. Washington allows for green, brown, or beige, which can be done via coloring, tinting, or striping. Colorado allows for green, and perhaps a little bit more flexibility in how that green can be applied to packaging. Additionally, Colorado's bill specifically prohibits non-compostables from using design elements that would typically be associated with compostables. If more states move forward with their own legislation, we hope to see more general alignment in each of these bills. At this point in time, there's no contradicting legislation. There are just certain states that are more stringent than others, so companies satisfying those more stringent states currently satisfy all the states that have legislation in place. The next steps here are that existing laws are enforced and that more geographies introduce similar laws so that we can move forward toward uniformity. These steps, combined with consumer education, will improve overall consumer behavior and work toward identifying the bad actors and removing them from the marketplace. So that's all from me. My contact information is up here, so you can reach out at any time. As I mentioned before, I work within the certification department. So if there are any questions that I can't answer about legislation specifically, send me an email and I can connect you with BPI's Legislation and Advocacy Manager, Alex Trulip. So just throwing that out there early.
Excellent, Jenny. Thank you so much. I'm going to quickly launch the poll here while, Natasha is getting her slides set up. And there was a note from Patrick Mercer from the state of Washington, and their recently released composting standards. I was curious from the panel, how much congruence do you see between efforts such as the state of Washington's and the guidelines that you're expressing here?
Can you all hear me? I think I'm off mute.
Yes.
So the state of Washington has actually inspired a bit of our principles and legislation elsewhere. And the one big thing that was missing when we were drawing up the principles in 22, I think it was 22, unless I'm forgetting, it's 22, was the enforcement piece of it. And I believe that what he is saying, and it's true, what Patrick is saying, is that there has been some change to that legislation or to the bill that passed so that there is an enforcement piece to it. So we think that their work has been very good in Washington.
Great. And Pat, in the chat, there are some links and also a little bit of back and forth about the state of Washington programs if folks are interested in looking at that. So I've relaunched the poll. People who have not responded, please do so. That would be great. And without further ado, we will have Natasha take it away.
Hey, everyone. Yes, thank you. Thanks for staying with us. And thanks, Linda and Jenny, for sharing for us what you all are doing behind packaging and labeling, because prosecuting manufacturers that are putting out packaging and materials that aren't truly compostable is what, of course, will make the redesign a first priority for them, right? Because we all need to get material back into our systems that we can truly compost and truly recycle so that our systems aren't flooded with the bad stuff, right? So I'll go on and tell us about SWEEP and how today's topic correlates and fits with SWEEP certification. How policy is actually one of our pillars. It actually moves the work through pretty well. And so here we go. So at SWEEP, we have a vision of a world without waste, where all of society's discards are viewed as commodities to be continuously cycled back into a circular economy at their highest and best use. And the sector our work then focuses on to tackle this challenge is the solid waste industry. And we're looking at how we can incentivize this industry to see itself out of the business of landfilling and to instead be managing resources, moving materials into circularity and towards sustainable materials management, all things we all want for our systems. And so we're also looking at ways that how this particular industry can start to send messages back up to manufacturers that they need to start to redesign products so that once again, these products, as they come through our recycling systems, aren't just headed for landfills and that they're truly recyclable and truly circular. So a little bit of background about us. SWEEP was founded in 2016 by Rob Watson himself in the corner there. He's the same man that founded LEED, the green building rating system that has been around for about 25 years and is the largest and fastest growing and most recognizable green building standard in about 170 countries now. And just as it was when he was first creating the LEED standard to measure efficiency in buildings, how they're using their energy and their water, and how he saw that there was no standard by which they were measuring those efficiencies. He saw similar irregularities in the waste industry and how it was measuring its diversion success. And that was that there was no universal system. And a lot of that boiled down to that there was no universal definitions for the materials that are being measured for diversion. And so in the United States, there are about 20,000 local governments. And in those 20,000 cities and municipalities, you'll see upwards of 1,000 different types of recycling programs. And really why there are 1,000 different programs is because there's no standardization in the way the industry defines the materials flowing through these systems. For example, if you take a look at a waste characterization being done by one firm in one region or city versus one doing it in another one, the terminology and the verbiage on there will be different. Like maybe on this characterization, plastics or rigids, like what does that mean, right? And then on another one, there's some that says PET and the different types of polymers, so the different numbers and the chasing arrows, but it's not the same from characterization to characterization. And then, of course, everyone's favorite today, the organics waste people on the call or on the webinar, the varied classifications of organics and how you'll see it in different cities. So on one study, one city just might be looking at the food waste that's separated, and another city is looking at the yard trimmings that people put on their curb. And then another city is commingling all that, like the food waste and the yard trimmings as a metric. So often there is no real congruency in the definitions, and because there isn't a clear picture of the material that's being diverted, there can't be a clear picture of the true volume of what's being diverted. And currently, everyone just kind of goes off into their silos and says, we're diverting quite a bit of green waste, but like I said, they're just looking at yard trimmings, or they're just looking at yard trimmings, or they're looking at yard trimmings and food waste. And of course, that's going to be the bigger form of diversion, right? So one of the key pillars of SWEEP's work is setting about to clearly define materials and set industry terms. So we're creating a standard, right? One that eventually everyone can kind of compare their progress across cities, like using the same nomenclature and the same metrics. And so this will help recycling to get better because we'll know where we are and where we need to go because we're all using the same terms. Okay, and so a snapshot of the ecosystem that SWEEP works, operates in. And for the sake of the slide, you're seeing a perfect world where an organization takes the time to certify that their discards are fully recyclable and compostable because they've gone through the third-party verification standard that's called TRUE, which is one of our companion organizations. And so when they roll their carts out to the curb, all separated and nice, truly recyclables in one bin and truly compostables in another. This is where SWEEP comes in and expands its view to the ecosystem, that is the entire materials management industry, and begins to certify what's going on a macro level. So once those materials have gotten on that trek, what's happening to them? These valuable resources, are they headed to a MRF for further separation and circularity? Again, like, for example, organics headed to composting facilities. I always like to, my next materials, like demolition materials, that I like to focus on, like, for the built environment, like the windows, the steel, the concrete, the roofing, the wood, even the doors, are those materials headed back into some new markets, like to be sold in reuse stores for purchase to go into new buildings, also creating new jobs? Or is everything instead headed to a landfill, or God forbid, a waste to energy facility where they will lose their next level of worth and value? So SWEEP is that third-party system that incentivizes and verifies that local governments and their solid waste handlers are creating circular and environmentally sound operations. And so because of this model of analysis, the only parties eligible to go through SWEEP certification are local governments and materials handlers, material management handlers. And though these same local governments and handlers can be members too, the entities that can only become members in SWEEP are those that are planning consultants, waste brokers, and nonprofits. But members are very, very important to SWEEP because that is how we've gotten our standard developed, with hundreds of subject matter experts joining SWEEP, and from all across the materials management industry, some with decades of experience, donating thousands of hours of their time to help us continue to craft this language or this nomenclature so that we can all get on the same page about what we're collecting and what we're measuring and what we're diverting. And we use retrack, just kind of make it a little faster. We do use retrack. Some of you might be familiar with that from your MMP certification. And let's see. So onto what SWEEP is measuring, we actually have 5 performance categories that encourage practices that best manage an operation's environmental, social, and economic impacts for materials management handling. And these categories are these categories are sustainable materials management policy, waste generation and prevention, solid waste collection, post-collection recovery, and post-collection disposal. Credit points are awarded for each category based on specific, measurable, and verifiable actions. And after adding up all potential points from each category, you can have 100 points. And there's even room for innovation. Let's say there's something that's not represented in our standard or our certification manual, and you've come up with a new and kind of novel way to handle some form of materials management or waste diversion. You can submit that for review, and there's upwards of about 10 points that are available for exemplary performance. And so now that makes it a total possible points of 110 points. And so similar to LEED, after added up, the points will certify and award at the certified silver, gold, and SWEEP levels. And eventually we plan to have a SWEEP 0, which will just be a pass or fail system. And so I'm going to give you a brief overview of each SWEEP performance category eventually, but really going to be zeroing in on how policy, like today's presenters addressed in their talk, makes a big difference in creating better materials management, making sure resources begin to really start to skip the landfill. So second only to post collection recovery, policy is worth quite a big share of points for SWEEP certification, coming in at 21 points available, with that 100 points. And so over the next couple of slides, I will share some good examples of laws passed in the last several years that are accelerating some good waste diversion from landfill. And first up, we'll go ahead and focus in on SWEEP member city Austin, who enacted a C&D ordinance back in 2016. And in Texas, construction, demolition waste and landfills totals over 7.5 million tons, accounting for over 21% of the total waste sent to landfill across the state every year. So in 2016, new construction projects over 5,000 square feet and commercial and multifamily deconstruction projects of any size saw themselves having to divert at least 50% of that material from the landfill, bringing that landfill space capacity down to 10% up, instead of that 21% that it was actually taking up in the landfill. Another good policy accelerating some good diversion from landfill is out of California, where their novel organics waste diversion law, SB 1383, has come along and really ramped up their work on organics waste diversion. They had a law before this that was already doing this, but What this law is really doing is California is every year puts about 5.6 million tons of food into the landfill. And if any of you know that that's actually the third cause of methane emissions because of the way it is decomposing in landfills, that is warming our planet or exacerbating climate change. And of that food, that 5.6 million tons, as some of you may know on the call, about 40% of any amount of food that ends up in the landfill is actually edible. And so that became 2.2 million tons that they saw that they could earmark, or that they saw that there's some potential with that. But what makes this law actually novel is that California has gone another step and said of that 40% of food that's ending up in landfill that's actually edible, we're going to start making it to where we're creating a policy where 20% of it actually has got to be recoverable, so that I can't see. Okay, 20% of that has actually got to be recoverable so that we can actually start to feed our food insecure populations. So that translates to 450,000 tons. And then that translates to about 600 million meals a year that they're now able to share with their food insecure populations. I think that's a pretty cool bill. And then on to New York City, they've created a right to repair bill in 2023. And this ensures that consumers and local moms and pop shops can actually repair electronics. And this is needed a lot more because you'll see that manufacturers are doing a lot of holding on to their manuals and their repair details and the types of tools that they need as proprietary information, so that you have to come back to the manufacturer to fix your broken item, or even worse, you just have to replace it, which is a version of planned obsolescence, which is attributing to more than 80% of electronics being thrown out rather than recycled. And so in New York City, this is totaling 25,000 tons annually that's either being dumped in landfills or burned in local incinerators. So that's a great law that they've come out with, because even that burning of incinerating of materials is then affecting toxic pollutants into the air, and we're losing all that material just to put it into landfills, right? So the final law I'll look at is another law coming out of California that I can't stop talking about, and it's SB 54, the Plastic Pollution Prevention and Packaging Producer Responsibility Act. And its focus is on ensuring single-use packaging and single-use plastic food serviceware is truly recyclable or compostable. So that means that anything that people begin to ship into the state, its packaging must be recyclable or must be compostable. You will no longer be able to sell it within California. So this is an extended producer responsibility bill, shifting the burden back to the producer to design out waste, and raises $5 billion over 10 years to clean up communities most affected by plastic pollution. And the goal of this particular bill is that by 2032, there will be 25% less plastic packaging sold, and 100% of that packaging entering the state be recyclable or compostable. But why I really can't stop talking about this bill are my perceived implications for the bill. Because with California being the 5th largest economy in the world, wouldn't this lend to redesign to mass proportions, with manufacturers now having to redesign their packaging and single-use wares in such a way to comply with California regulations? It seems it would affect many, if not all, of the company's packaging lines, making it easier for other jurisdictions now in other regions within our country to now have actual recyclable materials flowing through their districts and recycling systems, which is just all a good ripple effect, because they've now, these manufacturers have now got to design products in such a way they can even enter California. So that's some good examples, some good policies. And now I'll give you a brief overlook of the other 4 categories that SWEEP uses to certify our any kind of entity going through certification, and that's waste generation and prevention. This category basically gives points for any kind of waste generation on the front end that cities are doing to kind of educate their citizens to source reduce at the front end. Are you supporting things like repair programs, fix-it cafes, tool libraries? Next category is solid waste collection, and this looks at the transportation piece of your materials management operation. Are you doing things like greenhouse gas emissions, or lessening your greenhouse gas emissions of your fleet by optimizing its fuel economy and optimizing collection routes? This category also looks at how what the human impact is on collection workers. because I'm sure we know that this is actually one of the most dangerous jobs, only dropping from 5th most dangerous in 2020 to 7th. And it historically had been as high as 3rd most dangerous job. So that you get credits or get points in SWEEP for looking at your staff and making sure they're getting living wages. Next category is post-collection recovery. And in general, this category focuses on landfill diversion of all recyclable materials through all kinds of different recovery methods, making sure diverted resources are getting back into viable markets to get the highest and next best use. Also in this category, you'll see things like operations being rewarded for how green their buildings are, how green their operations are, and just think LEED green building. Are they energy and water efficient? Are they also not doing things, is their operation not doing things that's affecting the communities around them? Because sometimes there are people that are actually living near landfills and solid waste operations. So that's taking into account neighbor policies and how your operation is not affecting the environment. Final category is post-collection disposal. And this category in general measures how effectively you dispose of materials that are truly waste and have no higher value. Though it's important to note that there are no points given to disposal. Something like landfill gas is being captured out of a methane being captured out of a landfill and then turned into a renewable energy to power buildings and move fleets. This is where you could get some reward for turning true waste into another method of something that can be used. And so this is where SWEEP is doing its work currently, while working with certifying these local governments. We have just certified a Northwest city on the West Coast at Silver, and we've just certified a processor at the gold level. That's Mount Diablo Resource Recovery in Concord, California, who's actually did really well at environmentally preferable purchasing programs. They got points for that, and they got some innovation points for exemplary performance and their different source reduction programs, and for using an alternative fuels fleet. So let's see, do we have questions, Rob? I don't want to keep going if there are questions. Let me keep going.
Keep going. If anybody has questions, please put them in either in the chat or in the Q&A.
Cool. Okay, great. So so some benefits of deciding to take your municipality or your solid waste handler, your sustainable materials management handler through the certification process, is that it's been shown that if you can achieve 25% higher diversion rates by going through SWEEP certification with reduced contamination, that improves recycling yields, as well as savings realized from paying less in landfill tipping fees. Independent third-party SWEEP certification also sends a clear message to constituents and ratepayers that your organization is a leader in sustainability, something that is becoming increasingly more important to citizens and ratepayers. And certification of circular and sustainable operation also attracts new and young professionals who are looking to work for corporations that are aligning themselves with environmentally positive frameworks and business models. So recapping on ways to get involved, once again, the certification process is there that we love any city or any local government or industry provider to go through. There's also that membership that you can join SWEEP for a nominal fee and actually join our technical committees that meet up to keep shaping the standard and keep creating this roadmap that we're all trying to get on to get municipal solid waste to eventually one day begin to call itself sustainable materials management. Get us all into circularity. So this is just a viewing of some of our members here. We'd love for you to join. United States Composting Council is actually one of our very newest members, if not our newest. And if you become a member, we'd love to invite you on, just like they've done today, to come talk shop with us and share with the nation some really great things that you guys are working on and some successful initiative that your organization has taken on. Also, when we roll out SWEEP, the SWEEP professional accreditation training, which is similar to that LEED GA accreditation, we'll give you 10% off of that if you join as a member. And let's see, yeah, and
We've got a question about whether community compost can get certified in SWEEP.
Yeah, so that's actually something we're trying to start to imagine or analyze, especially because there's so much that community solutions and community-based organizations can solve when it comes to solid waste issues. And because there's a lot of funding out there, like the feds are starting to realize that it shouldn't just be the onus of the municipality to begin to make some of these changes or come up with these solutions, especially when there are community-based businesses that are already picking up the slack and doing composting, already doing C&D collection and selling it back to their communities. So SWEEP is trying to figure out, or we're workshopping right now, a way to not just certify big local governments, but to also begin to get out into the communities and begin to look at how some of these smaller companies are solving for solid waste and making sure that we're creating circularity and sustainable materials management. You might have more to say on that, Rob.
Yeah, so we are trying to promote compact supply chains. So things that are local would get extra credit because particularly compost would get credit for being close to the source of not only the final product but also the source of input material. So that's one way that community composting currently can get credit. As Natasha noted, we are defining and refining the standard to be adaptable to providers of a single service like a community composter, and also introduce some of the elements because many of these activities are associated with community-based organizations, and ensuring that these groups have a way into sort of more formal relationship with city level sustainable materials management programs, et cetera. We have another question about whether it is possible to get credit for someone trying to degrade non-recyclable plastics naturally. So I'll take that one. SWEEP is a performance-based system. So if you can demonstrate that you are recycling material, we don't tell you how to do it. We would tell you that if you can show that you are diverting a certain amount of material, then you get credit for it. We do not at present consider waste to energy a creditable approach in SWEEP Plus. Some of the emerging chemical and catalytic based plastic recycling technologies may down the road get credit, as long as because one of the challenges with things like pyrolysis is, okay, you reduce the gas, you get a syngas which can be turned into new plastic, but is it? And so that's going to be one of the things, if they just take the syngas and burn it for energy, then that's, kind of one step in, but that's one step removed from incineration, which right now is not creditable. And so we may allow things under SWEEP, which is designed for the middle of the waste market, to give credit for waste to energy technologies, but that standard has not begun its development process yet. So it's too early to tell what's going to come out of that. And so, we're trying to look at elements that are addressing the entire spectrum of the market. And so, things that might be creditable under SWEEP might not be creditable under SWEEP Plus. But the eventual goal is to move everything towards zero waste. But in order to do that, you have to sort of connect the train to the entire market. And as we all know, there's a lot of stuff out there in the market. Some works, some doesn't. And as we know more, we'll be able to make better decisions about what, is included in the standard, what stays in, what gets kicked out if the promise doesn't seem to be fully realized. So I am done. I don't have any more thoughts, and I don't see any more questions. Okay. Okay, so there's one final question, Natasha. Could you please speak briefly about any credits considered for community outreach and educational activities focused on proper waste sorting at the generation point, as well as behavior change, et cetera?
Yeah, so the second performance category that was on there is called waste generation prevention. And so I don't know how many points. Let's go back and see how many points, but that's very important to sweep too, because more than we want to just be recycling and creating these systems, yeah, it's got about 18 points. We want to actually be this force that's getting municipalities to teach their communities how to stop generating waste to begin with. So there's plenty of points or plenty of ways for cities to get involved with people not having to buy things and wanting them to actually reduce waste on the front end. And that's what I mentioned, like the tool cafes, the share cafes. There's even points for like food recovery that's really important. So just kind of anything you can do to make sure that people aren't purchasing more to begin with and not trying to recycle, because recycling isn't the first option. We want to reduce. So yes, there are points for reduction strategies.
There was one final question about whether this material can get taught in K through 12 schools. And I will refer the questioner to the Green Schools Alliance, which is one word, greenschoolsalliance.org. They have a lot of material designed for K through 12 teaching that's focused on recycling, composting, et cetera. With that, I'd like to once again thank Linda and Jenny for all of the very important work that their organizations and they as individuals are doing, as well as an excellent presentation today, which I found very informative. And it's exciting to see that we are beginning to tame a little bit the Wild West that is, even after 50 years, what constitutes the diversion and recycling industry. And again, thanks, Natasha, for doing a great job today. And we really appreciate everybody's attendance. And please, if there are any questions about SWEEP or any of the materials, write to us at info@sweepstandard.org. Sweepstandard.org is one word. And we hopefully will see you at the next free SWEEP webinar.
Thanks, y'all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny and Linda. See you next time.
Thanks.